After we saw how the heroes got to Battleworld in part 1, it's time to look at the 12-issue series itself. But I want to do this a little bit differently. It would probably get a bit tedious if I were to talk you through each of these issues one by one. Hard to believe, I know. But to avoid that risk, I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I'm going to review it via a top 12. My top 12 moments of this, the most famous comic book limited series in history. It isn't a countdown. We won't start with the weakest moment and end with the best. Instead, we'll just use my top 12 moments as signposts on a chronological journey through the story. But first of all, let's get something straight. If you look up Secret Wars on Wikipedia or anywhere else, you will be told that it ran from May 1984 to April 1985. This is wrong. Back in the old days, when comics displayed the month on their cover, there was a particular mindset held by publishers. They were of the opinion that if a comic in, say, March displayed February on its cover, or, God forbid, January, then customers wouldn't buy it because it was seen as being out of date and they just wanted the latest issue. I'm not sure my 10-year-old self would agree with that. Yes, it was exciting when new comics arrived at my local newsagent, but if I saw a comic that I didn't have, I wanted it, regardless of the date on the cover. Nonetheless, the publishers were convinced. So their solution was to give themselves some wriggle room by predating their covers by a few months. By putting a date on the cover 3 or even 4 months in the future, it meant that a comic wouldn't look out of date even after it had been sitting on the shelves for 2 months. Thus, a Christmas issue would be cover dated April, and a comic that came out in January would actually be cover dated May. May of 1984 in this case. So no, it didn't run from May 1984 to April 1985. It ran rather neatly throughout the year of 1984, from January to December. This cover by series artist Mike Zeck is one of the most famous covers in comic book history, and I talked about it a bit more in part 1 of this review. Even the corner box alone is enough to get the juices flowing. Look at it, a collection of faces from the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, the X-Men, along with solo characters like Spider-Man and Iron Man. Because remember, Iron Man wasn't a member of the Avengers at this point. And all the heroes bursting out of the cover with the big question: can the combined might of Earth's most powerful superheroes defeat the ultimate menace? It just screams at you, why aren't you buying me, reading me, and then going to bed dreaming about marrying me? Mike Zeck had a bit of an odd career as an illustrator. Other than substantial runs on Master of Kung Fu and Captain America, he didn't have any long stints on any of the titles he worked on. He regularly would contribute art to just 1 or 2 issues before moving on. Despite this, his name will be forever remembered for his work on this series and the seminal Kraven's Last Hunt. Rather appropriately, the first moment on my list is the beginning of the series. But flicking through the first issue, it was difficult to work out when that moment ended. Clearly, it begins on page 1, when the Beyonders construct containing the heroes appears. But does it end on page 4 after the introductions are over? Or does it end on page 5 after the heroes have challenged Magneto's presence among them? And if that's the case, then what about the following few pages, where we see Battleworld created? And what about Ultron and Galactus? In truth, for such a historic series as this, you could argue that every moment is one big moment. But that wouldn't really work for this show. So I've made a decision. The first moment on my list is the first half of issue 1. Fantastic. Oh wow. We start with a first page that is as familiar to me as the front cover is, because having read this series so many times, especially the very earliest issues, they are absolutely ingrained on my memory. We've only got 3 panels on this first page, but again, each of them to me are iconic as anything else in the series. From the first picture of the spiral galaxy to the next one of the same spiral galaxy, but now the Beyonders construct has just instantaneously appeared, to the next panel showing Captain Marvel, The Thing and Spider-Man, saying, "This isn't Brooklyn, is it?" Then, of course, we have the big 2-page splash showing all of the heroes before they all introduce themselves to us. And when I was younger, it used to confuse me that The Thing introduced himself as the Easter Bunny. I used to think, why is he saying that? I was a bit of a thick child. No one comments on the extra heroes that are there, because Rogue, Cyclops, Lockheed, none of those were with the X-Men when they were transported via the construct in Central Park. And the only allusion to it is in issue 2, when Cyclops comments on the fact that he was on honeymoon, and he says specifically that he was taken from the arms of Madeline Pryor. Then the villains arrive, and I've always thought that Dr. Octopus was a bit out of place in this assembly, because he's not the foot soldier type at all, is he? He was always kind of working on his own, and I know several of these characters are known for working on their own, but even so, it just doesn't seem right that he, a professor, is just one of the grunts, really. Speaking of grunts, we have the Wrecking Crew, of course, Yawn. The likes of Electro or the Sandman would have made for much more interesting villains, rather than these just generic, super strong but not magnificently super strong characters. With the two factions so clearly delineated, we then broach the subject of Magneto being with the heroes. And it's testament to the depth of Magneto's character that we have that discussion. And he himself says, I'm no villain, I'm no murderer, I just fight for what I believe is right, I fight for my people. Although he does mention the fact that he has a secret lair. A little tip, Magneto, if you don't want to look like a baddie, don't tell people you live in a secret lair. At that point, we see the awesome power of the Beyonder at work for the very first time, as they watch the entire galaxy around them being destroyed, and then fragments from those planets. Are they those planets or from other planets? Because we know there's a fragment of Earth on Battleworld, and that hasn't been destroyed, has it? Nonetheless, fragments from various planets, let's say, are formed together to form a whole new planet, Battleworld. At this point, can I just say on a personal note that around the time of this series, or a couple of years after probably, because it came out the year after in the UK to the original publication, I had a dozen or so stickers that looked like they were from a sticker album for Secret Wars. They included the heroes and the villains, but they also included scenes, backgrounds, alien races and characters that aren't from this series at all. It's as though they were from a cartoon series. What cartoon series? I've never been able to find out. And no, it isn't the kind of Secret Wars adaptation that was in the Spider-Man cartoon series, because that was in the 90s, that came out. It was during the 80s. I have no idea where those scenes were taken from. If anyone does know, please let me know. Battleworld's construction wasn't only witnessed by the heroes, of course the villains also saw it. And Doctor Doom is, to say the least, intrigued. Doctor Doom I was already familiar with before reading this series as a child, but quite a few of these villains I was meeting for the first time in this series. Two of them were Ultron and Galactus. Well, straight away we are shown the power of Ultron, and also his incredible superiority complex. So what about Galactus? Yeah, he's big, yeah, he wears a funny hat, but what can he do? Because he's very quiet. Does he do anything? Well, it doesn't take long for that question to be answered, as still without speaking, he levitates Ultron up towards him and then sucks every ounce of energy out of the insane robot. And just like that, Galactus becomes everyone's favourite villain. Now the Beyonder is finally revealed to us. He doesn't really have a form as such, but nonetheless his appearance is still as iconic as his kind of mid-80s big shoulder padded black curly haired version. Not only that, but he speaks. I am from beyond. Slay your enemies and all you desire shall be yours. Nothing you dream of is impossible for me to accomplish. And with that, the premise for the entire series is laid out for us. And that is also the end of our first moment. Please don't be cross. It's got to end somewhere, otherwise it'll just go on forever. So the premise for the entire series is spoken by the Beyonder himself. We are then shown the Beyonder repulsing Doom and Galactus, the two constructs being sent to Battleworld, and some initial tensions between the X-Men and the rest of the heroes. The issue ends with the villains launching their first assault against the good guys. That battle is detailed in issue 2, where we see what we all bought the comic for. Loads of villains fighting loads of good guys at the same time. We also see both sides settle into their new headquarters. We then move on to issue number 3 and moment number 2. These moments aren't in any particular order, but if they were, then for me, this would be number 1. After seeing Magneto and the Wasp spend some time together, and also us spending a bit more time with the heroes and seeing Thor enjoy the storm, we and Spider-Man overhear a very worrying discussion amongst the X-Men. Charles Xavier himself is saying that they don't belong there with the heroes. And Rogue, who's only recently tangled with the Avengers, is quick to agree. She says they don't like her at all. And just as other members of the X-Men are discussing the fact that it seems they will always be feared and hated, Professor X senses Spider-Man's presence. And that is when it all kicks off. The fight only lasts 2 pages, but in those 2 pages, he pisses all over the X-Men. And I love his put down towards Nightcrawler, who says, "I'll get him, I'm as fast and agile as he is." And Spidey says, "Not on the best day of your life, Nightcrawler." And Nightcrawler thinks, his strength, his speed, he is awesome. Yeah, he kind of is. Then, after swatting away Wolverine, Spidey escapes the whole team, and he sees Reed Richards. But before he can warn Richards about the X-Men's plans, his mind is wiped by Professor X. And our second moment comes to an end. I would move on to issue 4, but we've got another moment to focus on in this issue. Yeah, one thing that kept this series fresh was new characters being introduced, and we have the first of those here. Doom is in Doom Base, and he's using some equipment in the basement there to turn 2 normal women, I assume from Denver, because that's the chunk of Earth that was included in Battleworld, wasn't it? To turn them from normal women into Volcana and Titania. I love the look of both of these characters, but I particularly love Titania's character because she's such a bully, isn't she? Such a bitch. She looks great in that t-shirt, but she looks even better in costume. Straight away, she wants to prove herself, and she thinks that the Absorbing Man is the best person to prove herself against because he seems to be the toughest out of all of the baddies there. He isn't at all interested, which I think is a nice beginning to what goes on to be a good relationship between those 2 characters. But by the end of the issue, the villains attack the heroes' headquarters, and both women get the opportunity to prove their worth, as this quick-fire attack from the villains scores them their first victory of the war. Indeed, that attack drives the heroes out of their base. The villains want to press their advantage, and that brings us to issue 4 and moment number 4. This isn't a very well-known cover for this series, but the caption sums things up beautifully. Beneath 150 billion tons stands the Hulk, and he's not happy. Mike Zeck takes a month off with this one, as Bob Layton, a man best known for his work on Iron Man, takes over penciling duties. The heroes' base is completely destroyed, but Dr. Octopus quickly spots the heroes 5 miles away with his super-duper monocular. Titania shows just how strong she is by hurling a massive lump of the base towards the heroes, and the Wrecking Crew show just how average they are by throwing smaller chunks of debris at the heroes. The Molecule Man had shown his reluctance to get involved in the war from the very beginning, really, but now we get to see what he's truly capable of in what must be one of the most famous scenes from the entire series. After claiming that he could take care of the heroes for sure, he then proves it by lifting up an entire mountain range. It's about now that the first of the debris thrown by the other villains is reaching the heroes. The Hulk makes the bizarre claim that he doesn't have time to put the people he's carrying down to deal with that first big lump of debris, but Hawkeye and Iron Man deal with it instead. Then the other smaller bits of debris arrive before Captain America sums up their predicament with 2 words: "Oh no," and we see them absolutely dwarfed by the Molecule Man's mountain range. Most of the heroes get their time to shine during this series, and this is the Hulk's. Because in a small space, beneath what we are told must be 2 miles of rock, the Hulk is holding the entire thing up. Before long, Reed Richards regains consciousness, and he jerry-rigs a device using the circuitry from the likes of Spider-Man's web shooters and Hawkeye's arrows. And this provides a means for the Human Torch and Captain Marvel to supercharge Iron Man's suit, and Iron Man blasts a hole through the side of the mountain. Iron Man aimed that blast in the direction of some tapping that the heroes could hear. And now, emerging from the mountain, they see that the tapping was coming from Thor and his hammer. Thor? Now where's he been? We need to rewind for moment number 5. The Enchantress was taken prisoner after the battle in issue 2. And in issue 3, Thor and she vanished to have a godly chat. As they were getting cosy, perhaps a little too cosy, the earth moved, and that was the point at which the mountain range was dropped on the heroes. Thor senses that something is wrong, and the Enchantress, who it seems is genuinely trying to win Thor over, transports them both back to the heroes' base. We know that base has been destroyed, something that they quickly discover. But not only do they find the ruins of the base, but they find the villains waiting for them. And when I say villains, I mean all of the villains, except for Galactus, of course. Titania is still keen to prove herself. And Thor, you've got to admire his nobility, because even against all those odds, he speaks in a very godly manner and demands that Doom gives him answers. Doom explains that all the heroes are dead and that Thor will soon join them, and he points out that the odds are 13-1 against Thor. Thor says that no odds will deter him, but perhaps it isn't 13-1. The Enchantress, though, chooses her side and leaves him to it. The Hulk has had his moment in this issue, and now we have Thor's. And what a guy, as he takes on every single villain at once. Ultron, Titania, Kang, the Absorbing Man, who's even absorbed some alien metal to make him stronger. Piledriver from the Wrecking Crew says they're trying to subdue him, but he's too strong. Too strong for the Wrecking Crew? Wow. Finally, it is Ultron that deals with Thor, as he seems to disintegrate him with a power blast. But as we know, he got away, and he did so by using a flash of lightning to hide his escape. At the end of this issue, the heroes stumble into the alien village, where the healer Zaji helps them to recover. The villains, however, still won't give up, and in issue 5 they attack the heroes once more, but the X-Men fly in to save the day, albeit losing Colossus to injury in the process. I'm sure some of you are thinking, excellent, this must be moment number 6. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but no, it isn't. It's a nice little skirmish, but there really isn't anything memorable about it. Nothing I can instantly picture in my mind's eye. So we move on to issue 6, which sports a great Bob Layton cover, which acts as a counterpart to Mike Zeck's cover for issue 1. Speaking of Mike Zeck, he is back on penciling duties, and the moment, well, it's one that starts a bit oddly and ends tragically. The Wasp was abducted by Magneto back in issue 2. Since then, she's been pretending to fall for him in an effort to find out what his plans are. That ruse has succeeded, and she's discovered that he intends to win the Beyonders prize, to gain enough power to usher in what he sees as a golden age under his rule throughout the universe. Once she found that out, she escaped from his base in one of the alien vehicles and will now catch up with her in that vehicle. But before too long, she crashes the vehicle and she now has to travel under her own steam, well, her own wings, to get back to the hero's base. We see her travel through various environments, because of course this is a patchwork planet, until she arrives at an area of swampland, which is the current abode of the lizard. Now he slinked off at some point after the battle back in issue 2, although I'm not sure if anyone actually noticed. And now between him and the Wasp we have a kind of a King Kong, Beauty and the Beast vibe. She notices he's been injured and tends to the wound, and this show of compassion seems to be enough to win the lizard round. He calms down, is more docile, and begins to trust her. At one point he even apologises after saying that she was crazy. And it's just after that apology, when the Wasp seems to have him wrapped around her little finger, that the Wasp is killed. Yes, killed by the Wrecker. He and the rest of his cronies have been sent out to recapture the lizard on the order of doom. But the lizard is enraged at their killing of the Wasp, and he quickly takes out 2 of the wrecking crew, naturally, before the Wrecker uses a stasis ray to hold him in place. He then lifts up the area of swamp that the lizard is in, and the Wasp, or as they casually refer to her in this, the Wasp's corpse. And the Wrecker says they'll dump her body on the way back to Doombase. Now we know they're the baddies. The funny thing is, the Wasp is dead, and she was only with the heroes for 2 issues. And this is issue 6. So far, this has been a fun series. But buckle up, Effendi, because we are about to hit top gear. For a start, we have another great Bob Layton cover, which features more action than most comics contain. Then, after the brand new Spider-Woman is introduced, this is Julia Carpenter rather than Jessica Drew, and the wrecking crew toss the Wasp's dead body to the heroes as they drive through the village, we catch up with some of the other villains. Doc Ock is flying one of the alien vehicles back to Doombase as fast as he can. That's because on board he has the Absorbing Man, Titania, and the severely wounded Molecule Man. He was attacked by Wolverine in the previous issue and would have been killed if not for Cyclops diverting the attack at the very last moment. Yeah, I know. Why wasn't that a moment? Well, it could have been. However, if you want to see the X-Men in action, nothing beats this. Volcana has just been transported aboard to be at the side of her loved one, the Molecule Man, when Dr. Octopus sees something on the radar. They are under attack. Again, the 2 villainesses show their worth in this fight. First, Titania, but more so Volcana, who, after the events of the last issue, is gunning for Wolverine and nearly burns him alive. But not before my highlight of the fight, when Wolverine chops off the Absorbing Man's arm. This is what it should all be about. Heroes fighting villains. This is the essence of the Secret Wars. Magneto ties Dr. Octopus up in his own arms, before Rogue and Storm team up against Titania. With the fight rapidly running away from them, the villains make good their retreat, with Volcana covering their escape. If I have any criticisms about this scene, it's probably that it isn't distinct enough from the fights in issues 5 and 6. And sometimes looking back, it's difficult to remember which little battle, which skirmish, happened in which of those 3 issues. That said, it is the longest of the 3 battles, albeit only just, and it does feature the Absorbing Man using his own arm as a weapon. Do you know what? We're not finished yet, because we don't have to wait long for moment number 8. There is just enough time to see the Absorbing Man reattach his arm, and to get a glimpse of another new character joining the war, before the She-Hulk, furious at the death of the Wasp, decides to avenge her teammate single-handedly. We know the She-Hulk means business as she announces to Bulldozer that she's there to discuss a certain little murder. Naturally, the entire wrecking crew are dealt with without She-Hulk so much as breaking a sweat. But then everyone's favourite bully girl turns up, and we get some awesome one-on-one action. Titania gets to prove that she's more than a match for the Jade Giantess. But the really bad news is that before long, Dr. Octopus and the Absorbing Man join in the fray. The whole episode ends with 2 very disturbing panels. One shows the She-Hulk being bludgeoned by every villain present, and the other shows from She-Hulk's point of view, looking up at the villains as they decide to kill her. And Titania says, "All together now." After some prevarication from Captain America, the issue ends with him declaring, "Let's go get those butchers." Although something very strange is happening with the art on that last page. Maybe Mike Zeck was ill and they got somebody else in to fill in for him. A great issue. Maybe impossible to top. Oh my. Are you ready for this? Here goes. Whoa. Drink it in. The best cover of the series? Hell yeah. It is one of the greatest covers ever. Yes, there's a ton of action going on in the background. The kind of scene this series was created for. But the focus is squarely on the least active character, who is standing in shock, probably at how darned cool he looks. Towards the end of Spidey wearing the black costume, it tended to be depicted as mainly blue with black lowlights. Here, in the early days, it is shown at its simplistic best, as being mainly black with blue highlights. Now we need to get something straight. This is not the first appearance of the alien suit. There are people out there who will tell you that it is, but that is so wide of the mark as to be completely laughable. This comic features the origin of the alien suit, not its first appearance. Its first appearance, not including the article in Marvel Age and other trade magazines, was in Amazing Spider-Man issue 252. That comic is legendary because of the suit's first appearance, and its confirmation that the rumours are true. That comic came out 7 months before this one. Not only that, but by the time that this comic hit the shelves, Spidey had actually stopped wearing the alien suit. So if anyone tells you that Secret Wars issue 8 featured the first appearance of Spider-Man in the alien suit, do me a favour, laugh in their face and then never speak to them again. If you hear it on another YouTube channel, unsubscribe on the spot and subscribe to me instead. God knows I need it. So the next moment is Spidey receiving the suit, right? Wrong. Without a doubt, this cover is awesome. But I can't make a cover a moment, no matter how good it is. And the actual moment when Spidey receives the suit is, for some reason, quite underwhelming. Whether it's because he only wears it for 2 panels, or because it doesn't compare favourably with this incredible cover, I don't know. Controversial, I know. Instead, we are going to focus on what would prove to be the final battle between the heroes and the team of villains. The final battle between them in the whole series. Yeah, with 4 issues still to go. We rejoin She-Hulk where we left her, being pulverised by the villains. But the sound of Thor's hammer on the walls of Doom Base alerts them to the arrival of the heroes. And after Dr. Octopus ensures that She-Hulk is out of the picture, things really kick off. Iron Man takes out the Wrecker. Spider-Man impresses us all again by taking out Bulldozer with just 1 shot. The Absorbing Man takes exception to this, but whilst he is trying to deal with Spider-Man, the Thing turns up and tries to deal with him. However, not for the first time in this series, the Thing loses his rocks. It's then up to the new girl to deal with the Absorbing Man, one way or another. Hawkeye then uses his bow in the most straightforward and yet effective manner. He shoots Piledriver with an arrow. I also love the way Piledriver just walks off with the arrow stuck in him in shock. That arrow is, by the way, Hawkeye's last. And soon the Hulk is taken out of the fight by the Enchantress, which makes sense because otherwise it just wiped the floor with everyone. The Enchantress also tries to enthrall Captain America. It doesn't work. This is followed by another great skirmish between everyone's favourite bully and our resident wallcrawler. Now, I know I'm a Spider-Man fan, but even so, it is great to see him absolutely wipe the floor with someone like Titania, who is so far in excess of his ability in terms of strength. Titania's character is summed up nicely in 2 little quotes from this scene, one from her and one from Spider-Man. She says that she used to be the shrimp, She used to be the scrawny one who got her face rubbed in the dirt. Now she's powerful, and it's her turn. And his counterpart to that is that she ought to be happy. You aspired to be a bully, and man, you're a classic. Then the last we see of her, for now, is her crawling away, complaining about how the fight wasn't fair. Meanwhile, Hawkeye, who has no arrows, and Ben Grimm, who ain't got no rocks, are cornered by Claw and the Lizard. How are they going to get out of this one? Well, one thing's for sure, Iron Man isn't going to help them, because he's got troubles of his own after being half roasted alive by Volcana. It's only due to her concern for the Molecule Man's wounds that those two are captured by some of the heroes. Meanwhile, Captain America and the Human Torch have encountered Ultron. Whilst Cap concentrates on self-preservation, the Human Torch is struggling to have any kind of effect on the crazy robot. Captain America tells him to use his Nova Flame, but Torch says that at that range, Captain America will be killed. He says, "Don't worry, don't hold back, give it everything, son." And at that point, everything juddered to a halt. That is, for me personally. You see, the original series of Secret Wars wasn't widely available in the UK when it was first released. I was heavily into Marvel Comics in 1984 and bought tons of them, but never once did I see a single issue of this series on the shelves of my regular newsagent or any other newsagent for that matter. Instead, I, like many other UK-based comic fans, was introduced to the series via the Marvel UK reprints the following year. As was the norm with Marvel UK, these comics were an anthology title, and they were released fortnightly before converting to a weekly schedule. Secret Wars was its lead strip, but that only constituted half of the comic, the other half being filled by another title. For example, the original backup feature was Alpha Flight. Now, before you think, wow, 2 comics for the price of 1, I need to point out that they actually cut the content in half. So what you'd actually get, rather than 2 issues in one, was half of the Secret Wars comic and half of the Alpha Flight comic. This had the unexpected benefit of placing cliffhangers into a storyline that was strangely bereft of them in its original form. So when, for some reason, I stopped buying the Secret Wars title after issue 16, I left the story on a massive cliffhanger. An unarmed Hawkeye and depowered Ben Grimm trapped by the Lizard and Claw. Captain America at risk of being roasted alive by the Human Torch as they attempted to defeat the indestructible Ultron. How were our heroes going to get out of these situations? I wouldn't find out for another 20 plus years until I bought a collected edition. On the subject of collected editions, I suppose the first ever kind of collected edition of Secret Wars was released in the UK, as the end of 1985 saw the Secret Wars Special hit the shelves. A square-bound volume with a glossy cardstock cover which collected together issues 1 and 2 of the original series. Sounds like a beauty, doesn't it? However, the reality didn't deliver on the concept. It was great for me though, because as usual I'd missed the very first issue. And it was in full colour. I know, sounds old-fashioned, doesn't it? But at that point, Marvel UK was still using a mixture of colour and black and white pages in their comics. Now, let's resolve that cliffhanger. The Human Torch did go Nova. Ultron was defeated, and Captain America wasn't roasted. As for The Thing and Hawkeye, well, to discover after more than 20 years that the way they bested Claw and the Lizard is by getting them to play patty cake was unexpected. Captain America finds Doctor Doom, but due to his shattered and demoralised state, Cap decides that he's no threat and just wanders off and leaves him. There's plenty of good news in what remains of this issue. First of all, Captain Marvel finds She-Hulk and gets her the medical treatment she needs. Plus, there's the fact that all of the villains are now locked up, and the Wasp is fully healed. Yes, that's right, healed, because she was never dead in the first place. Close to it, but not quite close enough. And thanks to the alien healer Zaji, she's now back to full health. Plus, of course, Spider-Man gets his funky new suit. And after all that, the very last panel in the comic shows Professor X warning the heroes that Galactus has begun to devour the planet. I need to lie down. Issue 9 is where a lot of people think the series should have ended. All of the villains, except for Magneto and Galactus, were captured in the previous issue, and in this one, we get to see the heroes trying to deal with the big man himself. That should warrant a place on the list, shouldn't it? But somehow things just don't get going. The X-Men try to attack him, but their hands are full just with his defences. Then, no sooner do the rest of the heroes attack, than he, along with Reed Richards, vanishes to his ship. After they both reappear, the assault begins anew. But just as the heroes reach him, he flies back to his ship once more, which is a real shame, because I'd love to have seen what would have happened if the Hulk had managed to get his hands on him. So yes, we have all the heroes attacking him, but we are robbed of any real resolution. So we move rather appropriately to issue number 10 for moment number 10. I understand why some people consider issue 9 to be the end of Secret Wars proper, because this issue marks a real change in tone for the series. There are no more set-piece battle royals between the good guys and the bad guys. In fact, practically all of the bad guys are relegated to the sidelines for the rest of the series, with the focus being on Doctor Doom more than ever before. Marvel planned to release a sequel to the event before issue 1 was even released, and in this issue we see the first seeds of that being planted, as the Beyonder begins to grow curious about desire. And the writing also bends towards the philosophical tone that was present throughout Secret Wars 2. Galactus, miffed at the heroes for preventing him from devouring Battleworld, is devouring his own world ship. This will give him the power boost he needs to come back and finish the job. However, Doctor Doom, who easily escaped confinement in the previous issue, has constructed a machine that will divert that power away from Galactus and to him. This gives him the confidence to take on the Beyonder. There have been lots of great events in this series already, whether or not they've been included in my top moments. But even so, the events in this issue are on a much more spectacular, much grander scale. That doesn't mean that they are necessarily any better than what's happened before, but they certainly are appropriate when you bear in mind that we are about to view the big battle between Doctor Doom and the Beyonder. The first thing Doctor Doom has to do before taking on the Beyonder is to redesign his armour. This serves two purposes. Firstly, he's more toy accurate, and secondly, and more importantly, to most of us anyway, he is able to incorporate into the breastplate a device that is based upon some of Galactus's technology that he uses to devour planets, and also based on some of the readings that Doctor Doom's armour registered from the Beyonder back in issue 1. Paired with the power that he's already diverted from Galactus, Doom hopes that the device in his breastplate will help him to siphon off the Beyonder's power, tip the balance in his favour, and ultimately give him victory. And what a battle it is. Our first view of it is awesome, like a scene from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And we see Doctor Doom at his most Doctor Doomsy, as after the Beyonder says, "Stop, you cannot approach me," he proclaims, "Then approach me, coward, on your knees if you have knees." Now that is Doctor Doom. The energies unleashed by this battle of wills is felt back on Battleworld. Doombase crumbles, and not only that, but a nearby sun is almost blown out like a candle. This is a battle on the grandest of scales. But still, Doom struggles. A leg, an arm are ripped from his body, and as he falls, he makes one last gambit. He projects an image of himself in front of the heroes and asks them to lend him their power. Anyone who accepts this offer, he says, will be granted power beyond measure, with which to further their noble purposes, of course. Well, that description certainly sounds like somebody present, and it's he who is the first and only person to reach out to Doom. But as Magneto reaches out for him, he hesitates, and in that moment of hesitation, the heroes take him down. Whilst they struggle, Doom, unable to maintain his projection, fades from view. And then, strangely, some would say irritatingly, it's Captain America who actually defends Magneto. He says that they were all tempted by Doom's offer. He suspects that Doom was exerting some kind of mental control, and perhaps Magneto got the biggest dose of that. And that hesitation, that was Magneto stopping himself from actually taking up the offer. Man, talk about giving someone the benefit of the doubt. And now the Beyonder begins his final onslaught on Doom. He explores and examines all of his memories. He even dissects his body, strips him of the armour. And it's at that point, as his armour is being lifted away from him, that Doom reaches out with his sheer determination, his sheer iron will, reaches out for the breastplate and the device inside it that could give him victory. There are more violent earthquakes and aftershocks on Battleworld, and shortly after the heroes release the villains so that they don't get crushed in the debris of Doom Base, Doom appears. The Beyonder has been defeated. Whilst Doom's story continues in issue 11, some other character story arcs come to an end. The Molecule Man challenges Doom because he thinks that Doom has betrayed the other villains. However, the new benevolent, godlike Doom actually removes a mental block that the Molecule Man had placed on himself. This gives him more confidence and the realisation that he is even more powerful than he thought. Speaking of confidence, Titania is low after losing to Spider-Man, and the rest of the villains just want to go home. Galactus is taken care of by his herald, Nova. Not that we see that. In fact, we don't see Galactus again for the rest of this series. Where the heroes are concerned, Colossus finally wins over the alien healer Zsaji. This fulfills not only his dreams, but also those of writer Jim Shooter. Finally, he had put an end to the relationship between Colossus and Kitty Pryde that he found so troubling. With all that going on, as well as Doom getting used to his newfound power, we're going to find it difficult to squeeze in a moment. However, we just about manage it, and it begins 4 pages from the end. The heroes are discussing whether or not they should fight Doom, and everyone there gets a say. Everyone gets a vote, including Magneto. The new godlike Doom claims to be a very different entity from the villainous Doom that we have known thus far throughout the history of the Marvel Universe. He claims that with his newfound power, he has transcended human desire and therefore is no longer a threat to anybody. Captain America doubts this though. He doubts it for 2 reasons. Firstly, Doom's claim that he's going to free his mother's spirit from the land of the dead. And secondly, because the first thing that Doom did when he had his newfound power was heal the scars on his own face. There is no uncertainty where Reed Richards is concerned. He is convinced that they have to stop him now. And the other 2 members of the Fantastic Four that are present are quick to agree. The Avengers follow the same line, as do the 2 Spider People and the Hulk. All that remains is for the assembled mutants to have their say. But all of the X-Men and Magneto agree that Doom must be stopped. All, that is, except for one, who harbours some very serious doubts. Colossus has sat silently throughout this meeting, but now he speaks. He says that Doom hasn't done anything to hurt them, and he may never do anything to hurt them. He says that he may actually be an entirely different being from what he was before, and if they strike him unprovoked, then aren't they the villains? Captain America understands and says he himself isn't certain about any of this, but it must be a unanimous vote. Plus, of course, even if they do all vote to take on Doctor Doom, they could be annihilated on the spot by a bolt from the blue. Colossus agrees that that could well happen, and that is part of the problem, because he has now finally found true happiness and true love with Zsaji, the healer. He doesn't know if maybe he's being selfish, and Captain America says, well, only you know that, son. And then, in one relatively simple but very powerful panel, we see Colossus, tears streaming from his screwed up eyes and his hands balled into fists in frustration. He relents and says, yes, we fight. And with that, Captain America is proved correct, as they are all destroyed by a bolt from the blue. Thor, the Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, every last person present is instantaneously destroyed by Doom. As 1984 came to a close, so too did our saga. For the last couple of issues, we've seen the remainder of the Beyonder's essence leap from character to character. And now, in the body of Claw, he begins to put doubts in Doom's mind. Doubts that his victory is as complete as it seems. And apparently this works, because before you know it, the heroes return. This leads to a big battle between the heroes and a group of silly-looking monsters created by Claw. Eventually, Captain America finds his way to Doom, but is promptly atomised. However, Doom's subconscious brings him straight back to life. With Doctor Doom suffering some kind of breakdown, the Beyonder uses this opportunity to take back his power. He then spirits away Doctor Doom, Claw and himself, leaving just the superheroes on Battleworld. This means the superheroes have won the Secret Wars? The team of villains definitely didn't win it. Neither did Galactus. Doom had won it, briefly, but that's only because he stole the Beyonder's power. So that just leaves the heroes as the last ones standing. But they don't get to claim the Beyonder's prize, because he has done a runner. What a con! There is a level of wish fulfillment awarded to the heroes, but we are told that that is down to the planet, because it's been charged with some of the Beyonder's power. Well, in that case, I guess it's time to say goodbye. And we do that via our 12th and final moment. Before the series draws to a close, the heroes get some downtime. The Hulk gets given a crutch after he injured his leg earlier in the issue in the hero's very last battle. And Professor X, he gets a new and awful costume. The Lizard has reverted to his human form of Curt Connors, and wandering aimlessly has found himself in the company of the heroes. And Lockheed, who hasn't been seen since much earlier in the series, returns, along with a new little dragon friend. And now the time has come for them all to return home. Reed Richards has constructed a device that will teleport them from the surface of the planet up to the orbiting construct of the Beyonder that is still up there in the skies. And then that will take them all back to Earth. Although ultimately they do still seem to be sent back to Earth in small groups. First to leave are the odds and ends. The Spider-Persons, Curt Connors, the Hulk and Magneto. Next up are the X-Men, although Colossus initially refuses to leave. He is heartbroken because the healer, Zagi, gave her life so that they, the heroes, could live again. Professor X talks him round and all the X-Men vanish, along with the new dragon that flies in just as they are vanishing, causing something of a small explosion. And Reed says he hopes it doesn't cause problems with their rematerialization back on Earth. The device is still working and the Avengers are up next, although one of their number is not returning with the rest of the team. The She-Hulk, instead of returning with the Avengers, will return home with the Fantastic Four, because she is taking the Thing's place. As we've seen in this series, there is something about Battleworld that enables the Thing to change from his rocky form into his human form, and he wants to stay to find out why that is. As long as Reed leaves the device with him, he can return to Earth at a later date. I do find it odd that he doesn't mention or even think about Alicia Masters at this point, but it's decided. The Avengers, without She-Hulk, but with Iron Man and Thor, leave, and then Reed Richards, the Human Torch and She-Hulk follow them, leaving Ben Grimm as the only hero left on Battleworld. And with that, the Secret Wars have finally come to an end. And that is the quiet end to the most famous comic book limited series in history. Despite the ending being a little low-key, with people just leaving, it represents, for me, a change in eras for Marvel Comics. The stories before this event feel like they're from a different time period. The Fantastic Four had their traditional lineup that had pretty much been in place since 1961. The Avengers had characters such as the Scarlet Witch and the Vision, who always felt a bit old-fashioned to me, and Spider-Man, of course, wore his famous red and blues. But here we see Spider-Man return home in his super cool new black suit. The She-Hulk joins the Fantastic Four, and just seeing her in her Fantastic Four leotard rather than the bland purple number she wore with the Avengers is evocative of the interesting, smart character that John Byrne made her into. Even the Avengers would change rather dramatically as Secret Wars ended, as the Vision and Scarlet Witch left and the West Coast Avengers became established. Comic character histories are always changing, but it really did feel that Secret Wars helped to create a shiny new Marvel Comics. And what of the series itself? As a kid, I loved it and reread it again and again. Some people who have read it for the first time in recent years see it as being a bit old-fashioned and a bit cheesy. Well, compared to modern comics, with their obsession with being credible, usually attempted by being dark, because, see, how can something this dark be for kids? Then, yeah, it is old-fashioned. That is because its only purpose was to entertain. And sell toys. And it did entertain, in buckets. It's a load of superheroes transported to an alien planet to fight a load of supervillains. Wonderful. Time and again, modern creators return to the event, either with direct follow-ups such as 2015's Secret Wars, homages such as 2010's Spider-Man and the Secret Wars, or 2015's Deadpool's Secret Wars, or a host of other callbacks and what-ifs. The biggest influence it had was on future event stories. Sure, there had been other multi-character stories before, such as the Avengers Defenders War and the Contest of Champions. But Secret Wars showed Marvel just how big an event could be, and that with strong editorial leadership, it could have an influence on other titles, that it could matter to the broader Marvel universe. Issue 1 had not even hit newsstands when the green light was given for a sequel, which would also be written by Jim Shooter. That was for the future. For now, we were going to have to check in with the heroes one more time to see what happened to them once they returned home.